Gloom and doom continues for a while longer. With our blocking pattern, it's going to last longer than the gloom and doom because that's going to roll on through next week. Two weather systems coming into the east, one weak, one not so weak, and that's over the weekend. And we will be taking a look at the long range, and we will be giving Joe some Robitussin. All of that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Where is that, Joe Rayo?
Where is that? That is in Suffolk County.
Yes, in southwest Suffolk County on
1226 North Wellwood Avenue.
Yeah, but where is Suffolk County on?
Oh, Long Island.
Yes.
The island of Long. The island of Long. Yes.
And they serve the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area. They are Long Island's largest rock salt source. And people from all over, I'm serious, come from they do come from all over when they can't get rock salt where they are. They drive to Long Island. They go to Omni. They have the best in the commercial snow and ice melt products like Mag and Pelledo, and of course, snow blowers for the Christmas tree, batteries not included, and the new generator. Everything you need to get through this winter. 631-756-1125. Nowhere could you find better prices. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And there you
and
are.
There I am in a little tiny box. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger and put it right next to you. And there we go. We're all set. So you were hoping that you would get some clearing tonight, correct?
Yes.
You're still hoping?
I'm still thinking that we will be. Well, I said that the clearing trend wouldn't get underway until after a wind shift line passes on by. And it's passing on by even as I speak to you now.
Oh.
So I do anticipate that we will be seeing the clouds thin a little bit and some breaks and holes developing later this evening. And hopefully we will have a view of the M&M, Moon and Mars, next to each other tonight. So have my fingers crossed for that.
Well, we are still in gloom and doom here in Northeast Georgia. 3 days of this stuff. And by the way, let me just clarify because apparently there's a little bit of confusion. I use that phrase gloom and doom to describe weather like the last 2 days, where it's damp and dreary and dismal. If it's raw with a northeast wind and temperatures in the upper 30s and low 40s, that makes it even more doom and gloom because it's not cold enough for snow. So that's what that refers to. There's no other meaning attached to it. It doesn't make reference to anything of substance, and it doesn't mean a major storm. It just means exactly what I described. And I would say, and Joe, you would agree, you've had doom and gloom. I've had doom and gloom here.
I usually refer to this kind of pattern as a 3D pattern. Dull, dank, dreary, which is exactly what it has been like here for the past couple of days.
Yeah, gloom and doom. So now we're going to clean house. I think what's become a couple of things. First off, the pattern we're in, this blocking pattern, is really taking full control of the weather. It's blocked because we've got a storm out in the ocean that just won't move. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. But it looks like this blocking pattern is going to last for a while. And once that ocean storm starts to move, I think we're going to start to see some changes on the not only on the Atlantic side, but I think we're going to see some changes on the Pacific side as we progress over the next couple of weeks.
Well, I think that between now and Christmas, we are going to have a rather active pattern here in the Northeast. In fact, I think that we're going to see not one, not two, not three, but possibly 4 significant weather disturbances move on through. Any one of them could very well bring us a touch of wintry weather with some snow or sleet, or maybe disappoint the winter weather lovers with a modest amount of cold air in place maybe just be a little bit too mild for the white stuff and just give us 4 more shots of what you would call gloom and doom, Joe?
Well, I tend to go along with the idea that we're probably going to trend colder. The block, I think, is going to start bleeding down some colder air. Not the kind of air that I think most people might jump to the conclusion that we're talking about temperatures way below normal. No, that's not going to be the case. But I think we are going to see some chilly temperatures coming in over the weekend. And of your snow events of your weather events that you're referencing to, does that include Sunday in that count or no?
Yes, it does.
Oh,
In fact,
oh,
in fact,
shock
somebody
of
on the chat,
shocks.
somebody on the somebody on the chat board was asking. I'm trying to find out who had said it, but said something like, "What was the GFS smoking during the 18Z run?" Yeah, Adam Lowe. Adam
Yeah.
Lowe said, "What was the 18Z GFS smoking? Can I have some?"
Well, look, right now, this is the part for me professionally. This is always the toughest part for me is to get that first weather system that's going to produce some snow out of the way, because you've often described it as if not having ridden a bicycle for a long, long time and then getting back on it. That's kind of where we are at this point. This is when that first weather system comes along, we want to make sure we got all the marbles in the right place. That's kind of where my head is right now. Just a
Yeah.
little bit of frayed nerves as far as trying to figure out what's going to happen. But I will say this. So there were two lows here that are coming. One Friday night and Saturday. That one, they're almost identical in terms of how the upper air is set up. And the first one just completely weakens and falls apart because it's not only coming in under the block, but that ocean storm that's out east of Bermuda, there's no room for anything. So it just basically falls apart. Now, if that ocean storm does not get out of the way, the second system could possibly meet the same fate. The models are saying that the ocean storm is going to get out of the way enough to allow for some room for the system to hold itself together as it moves southeast from the upper feature, moves from eastern Michigan southeast to off the New Jersey coast. If that ocean storm doesn't get out of the way, we could be having a different conversation here tomorrow.
Well, yeah, and you look at the pattern, and I mentioned to you off air earlier today, we were discussing the Sunday potential. And I said, the GFS 24 hours ago didn't even have a sign that this was going to be on the map. But now all of a sudden, we're looking at a system that's going to be rapidly passing off to our south, and maybe just enough, a marginal amount of cold air for us to consider, maybe not for New York City proper, but maybe for northern sections on Sunday late or Sunday night, a little bit of frozen precipitation, some wet snow or sleet or a mixture of that plus plain rain. We don't know.
Yeah.
Things are changing literally, Joe, with each passing day. Tomorrow we may be talking about something totally different.
Well, I think the upper feature is going to be really important in this. If that upper feature holds together, it could make for a surprise for somebody. On the other hand, if it doesn't, then this is just going to be a nuisance or not much to worry about. It's Wednesday night. We got a couple of days to figure this all out. So why don't we start? And I think I'm going to start, Joe. I want to take a look at this system that's out in the Atlantic Ocean that the Hurricane Center has been talking about on these special tropical weather outlooks that it's been putting out twice a day. There'll be another one coming out probably in about an hour. And this is not moved from yesterday. And it is also part of the reason why it's taking forever for this weather front to move offshore, because that storm is really creating quite the traffic jam in the atmosphere. And I'm looking at this and thinking, you know what? It's still, I don't know that it's tropical, It might be subtropical. I'm not seeing a core center of convection, but it's got a nice circulation. I think the pressure's down to about nine. That's like a 985-ish low that's out there.
Yes, but the Hurricane Center is only giving for possibly getting a name or possibly a classification even as just a subtropical system. 50% chance, a medium chance through 48 hours, and through 5 days, same thing,
Yeah.
medium chance, 50%. So it just looks like now the movement looks like they're going to try to make it move ever so slowly to the north and east. It's not going to stay stationary, but in
Forever.
terms of in terms of development, it doesn't look like. Quite honestly, I don't think anybody at the Hurricane Center knows what this thing is going to do over the next few days. And so let's just say it's going to be a 50-50 chance, and we'll keep an eye on it and see how things develop over the coming days ahead. But you're right. This is with the positioning and the slow movement is really helping to slow things down across the continent and throwing a monkey wrench in forecasters trying to determine what's going to happen even just a few days down the road.
All right. So, in the meantime, I got the U.S. loop up, and you can see that there is some progress going on from the Great Lakes into New England. But we also still have this stream of clouds running from the Pacific into West Texas and then crossing the middle Mississippi Valley through the Ohio Valley and Tennessee Valley and off the mid-Atlantic coast. Those clouds are still moving pretty much straight west to east. So how much improvement is going to hinge on how much dry air can force this frontal boundary to get a little bit further to the south during the overnight and for Thursday. I'm thinking there'll probably be some improvement tomorrow, Joe, with the maybe some sun coming into the picture. Uh, how much cloud cover again? I'm not 100% sure, but I think there'll at least be some sun tomorrow.
Well, another complication today. Now, I did not look at um, any of the other websites that provide numerical model prediction, but on tropical tidbits, I think Mr. Levy has been having his problems with the European because the European only. I mean, we had some spasmodic, if I may use that term, hits. So, for example, on the 12Z run, when I tried to look at the upper level or the upper dynamics, it only got as far as 0 hours, and then everything was missing up until about 114 or 117 hours. I mean, I really wanted to make a comparison between the European and the GFS, but I really couldn't do that because the European, at least on tropical tidbits, looked like somebody took a machine gun and blew out a number of notable hours out of the possible 240, so that really wasn't much to look at today or much to compare. Again, I don't know whether or not, Joe, any of the other sites that provide this kind of information had the same kind of problem with the European, but
No, it
certainly
was
that.
it was in on the other ones. Well,
Well,
we'll figure something out here. Meanwhile, by the way, we should point out that there's hang on one second here. It's very interesting here from SPC, Joe. SPC, and they actually had it yesterday, I think, in their day 8 forecast, but there's no severe weather indicated until the long range, and they've got severe weather showing up on day 6 in northeast Texas, eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas, 15% chance, which is the equivalent of a slight risk. And on day 7, the area expands and moves a little bit to the east. Now, this is going to be with the next storm that's going to be bringing probably some big snows to the northern plains, into Minnesota, maybe as far south as Nebraska, and also back through Wyoming and parts of Montana. That is going to be a system that's going to come into the east probably later next week. But this is they've already thrown up the risk areas here in the SPC's long range, which tells you that they have a pretty good idea that this is going to pan out.
doesn't really happen very often that they don't have anything in terms of possible severe weather for the first 3 days, and then you look out 6-7 days out, and that's where they're highlighting or targeting possible severe weather. As you mentioned, northeastern Texas and portions of Oklahoma, which move ever so slightly to the east from day 6 to day 7. So something to watch.
Yeah. Radar. It's going to give it a quick refresh. Just about all the showers are gone. By the way, I'm sitting in the part of Georgia that is just been socked in with clouds, and there's even still some showers streaming eastward. If you go south of Atlanta southward, it broke out and was nice and sunny today. It did get into the 60s here, so I know I lost the wedge, the northeast wind and the wedge that is notorious in the southern Appalachians for keeping things very chilly and raw and damp. Well, the wedge pulled out today, so got to see the temperatures at least get up into the reasonable 60s. But there are some showers still scattered around in parts of eastern North Carolina. We also have some heavier rains going on in Maine at the moment and back over into New Hampshire. That's with the frontal system, and you can see the showers, how they line up offshore, so you can pretty much pick out where the front is. And we've got rain coming up through West Texas and through Oklahoma, and then streaking eastward into northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, southeast Tennessee, and north Georgia. And also a little bit of snow action going on in parts of the Rockies west of Denver, and also back into Utah. Some snow showers up in northern Arizona, and also some precip there up in northern New Mexico, and a little bit of precip beginning to approach the Pacific Northwest. WPC in their forecast for precip. So let's take a look, because I think we can at least pull down the individual day. Now this is for from now till tomorrow evening. So you see where there's no rain. The Northeast is going to be pretty much dry. It's just reflecting what you're seeing in New England is reflecting what's left at the moment. But we've got 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half from North Texas east into western Kentucky and southern Illinois. Also seeing some 1/2 to 3/4 inch amounts into the Pacific Northwest. Then on day 2, which is Thursday night into Friday night, the area in the south extends into the Carolinas and Virginia. There's precip back through Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and then some light precip into Ohio. This is the first low that's moving southeastward and is basically falling apart. You can see on day 3, all WPC has is a small area of a few hundredths in Ohio, West Virginia, and in Virginia. So this system from days ago, which was shown to be robust, not by all models, but certainly by the GFS, finally that model woke up to the idea that, you know what, there's no room, and it's going to fall apart because of what's out to the east in the ocean, and that's exactly what's happening. Some heavy precip coming into California. Day 4. Now, day 4 is Saturday night into Saturday night into Sunday evening, and WPC has got a few hundredths and then an area of 1/10 of an inch plus cutting across New Jersey and back through northern Pennsylvania, southwestern and much of western New York. And then you have to add on to that some precip Sunday night into Monday morning, which is also hundredths to maybe 1/10. And that's it. And then you start to see what's going on in the west, by the way, with this new system coming into California and then moving into the southwest. This is going to be a rather robust storm. And in the Dakotas and in Minnesota and back through Montana, Wyoming, that's going to be snow, and it's going to be some big snows. And then that, of course, pushes further east as we head into Tuesday night into Wednesday night. So busy there. And then when we look at I'm going to go right to the long range. See if they did anything with this. They did earlier today. So this is Saturday into Sunday. So this is the period Sunday into Monday. Okay, here. So this is what WPC thinks, as this is the probability of anywhere. This is the probability of up to 1/4 of an inch of liquid equivalent of snow and sleet. So just to make it easy, I always say this is the probability of 2 to 3 inches of snow. And it's a 10 to 30% chance that they've indicated. Western Connecticut, Looks like, Joe, you're just north of you is where they have the cutoff line. Route 80 in New Jersey, west of 287. And then over into northeastern and north central PA, the Catskills points northward into the Adirondacks. That's where WPC is. That's what WPC is thinking for Sunday into Monday. I mean, unless there's some sort of surprise with the upper low that's coming down, I find it difficult to imagine that there's going to be much more than what's being indicated here, if that.
But as I said, because of the fact that the temperatures are marginal, I think initially we'll be looking at just mostly plain rain, and that would be arriving during the latter part of Sunday. Now, once we get under the cover of darkness Sunday night, and as the temperatures begin to fall, all of a sudden, marginally cold air becomes more significant for possible snow. And it's also about the same time that the storm that is presumably going to create all of this is going to be passing closest to New York City, probably just offshore to the south and east. And so then that precip will continue and then probably peter out after midnight. So again, my thoughts are if we get, let's say, a 12-hour or 14 hours worth of precip out of this, the first half during the daylight hours of Sunday would more than likely be rain. But Sunday night into the early hours of Monday, maybe just cold enough so that we begin to see kind of a mixed bag of rain, sleet, and ice and snow, or maybe sleet and snow, or maybe just making the full turnover from rain over to wet snow. Still, like over 90 hours to go before we have to be, or we'll have this system in our immediate vicinity, and probably another day or two before all of this starts coming more and more into focus. So we'll see how this all pans out.
By the way, on the long range, I want to also point out what's going on out in the west with the storm that's heading into the northern plains. You don't see this too often, but they've got areas of 90% probability of at least 3 inches of snow. I think it's safe to say that here in the western part of the United States, in the Sierra Nevadas and up into the Cascades, and also through a good chunk of the southern half of Idaho. This is for Saturday into Sunday morning. Sunday into Monday, it moves a little bit further to the east, so now you've got probabilities of 50 to 70% and a few areas of 70 to 90 in also, again, in the Sierra Nevadas, in much of Nevada, except the south, Utah, and in eastern Idaho, moving into western Wyoming. And then we get to Tuesday. So this is day 6 in their forecast. So they've got a 30 to 50% chance across South Dakota into North Dakota and Minnesota. And also in the western half of Colorado, we're seeing 50% chance or higher for at least 3. And then on the next time period, which is Tuesday into Wednesday, they've already got here. Let me get the state lines up so we can see it. Their site is slow. But this is for, again, Tuesday into Wednesday. They've already have a 50 to 70% chance of at least 3 in the eastern part of South Dakota, eastern North Dakota, and into Minnesota. 30 to 50% goes down into Nebraska. I think this could wind up being, this is, you match that up with that developing severe weather. I think we could have, this might be one of these systems that you're going to see some blizzard warnings go up in some of the counties there in the northern plains.
And Steve LaPointe hitting Super Chat and saying, Cioffi, I guess he's addressing you specifically.
Yes.
Cioffi, look at storm in Atlantic that continues to grow in size. Could be responsible for Sunday night, Monday morning snows all the way to the coast. I don't know about that.
No. Steve, that system, first of all, that system is way east of Bermuda. Second of all, that system.
The one that we're watching is going to do an Alberta Clipper and dive through the Great Lakes and south of our area on Sunday night and then offshore. That's the one that could do a number on us, right?
Since we're on that subject matter, we might as well go to that.
And to add to this confusion, also on Super Chat, thank you very much to David Fuller, who says GFS has totally flipped on the 18Z run. On the 18Z run, Joe's, it would be nice to see some flakes in my area on Monday. Though, what do you think? What you think? Do I have a chance? I don't know.
All right, let's talk about what's going on. Let's see if we can figure this out. So, the European 500, Joe, on Tropical Tidbits, the European fast, which is the old way when we were just getting 24-hour increments, EC fast.
Right.
Those are all out to 240. The individual model run, the more detailed run, did not load for some reason. I didn't see any warning. Usually, when he's having a problem with the server, he puts up a little message up there. I didn't see it, but so we can look at the 500 here for the European, and this is now. Here's the first low. This is Friday. Okay, so everybody take a look. This is your upper low on Friday, right there, sitting there in Iowa. You have a ridge here up along the east coast. There's an upper low sitting near Nova Scotia, and of course, just to the east of that is our storm that's sitting out in the Atlantic still, well offshore, but again, not moving very much. And you'll notice that by the time we get to Saturday, that upper low is gone. The ridge, it actually is just what's left of it is this little kink here that is moving southeastward, and the ridge just kind of pops right back up. So basically, that first system falls apart. Now, to the southeast, you can see the edge of an upper low that's still sitting well east of North Carolina, northeast of Bermuda. That's still out there. So nothing's moving. Everything's just just staying where it is in the upper air. Now another upper low, and here it is on Sunday morning, is in Michigan. You still have the block. You still have this thing out here in the Atlantic not moving. So this has to go to the southeast because that's the only place it can go. And in fact, here it is on the European, Joe. It's a nice little open trough. There's maybe a little L over there sitting right over New York City in the upper atmosphere. It's not a half bad looking shortwave, but the difference is if we look at the GFS, this is for Monday morning. I'll switch to the GFS, and the GFS, at least right before that, actually has a little two-contour closed cutoff low there in northwest PA that moves across Pennsylvania, and it's still cut off at 2 a.m. Monday, sitting right along the New Jersey coast, and then it exits out to the southeast. So it's a little deeper on the GFS, but I have to tell you, though, the GFS has been guilty of that. It was too deep with this system for Friday night and Saturday, where it had precip all over the place, while the other models did not, and it turned out that the other models were correct. I just wonder whether the GFS is just overdoing it here.
Well, yeah. Which as I said before, over and over, the intermediate.
Well, let's look at the 12. We can look at the 12. I mean, the 12's no different. I mean, the 12's got this cutoff low, and you see it there in northwest PA, goes right over New York City, and then just offshore. I think the only difference really in the two runs was that this particular run was just a little bit colder than the prior run. And you can see here, this is a total precip anyway. The overnight, it had snow inland and over northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. It's got a little surface low that develops. You see how the surface low acts. It just, once again, you've got another surface low that comes out of this mess in the southern plains. It can't go to the west because up here is a 1055 high that is sitting stationary in northeastern Quebec, southeast Labrador. So that low comes to a screeching halt, and then it has to just translate itself southeastward. So, yeah, I mean, the two runs weren't that different. I just question whether, is it overdoing the strength of that shortwave? If the ocean storm doesn't get out of the way, this thing's going to wind up being weaker.
And you don't want, well, if you don't want to bring in that warm air advection from off of the ocean, a weaker storm may actually work for you.
Probably better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a snow lover here, you want a weak surf, you want a weaker storm, but you want you want a stronger upper air feature so that maybe you could get a little dynamic cooling to get involved.
And that's the fun part, where you start out looking at a system where it's marginally cold. You say, well, that's not going to be enough cold air to generate much of anything. But then the darn thing starts intensifying far more quickly, especially once it gets involved with the Gulf Stream. Intensifies, and all of a sudden, yes, as you just mentioned, Joe, dynamically it produces enough cold air to suddenly change everything over. In fact, I think in part that's what happened during the unusual early season pre-Halloween storm of 2012. We had a system that moved offshore, got much stronger, much quicker than any of the computer models had suggested, and the cold air really just dynamically suddenly came in place to produce heavy amounts of snow over the interior, such as my house. So
Right.
those kind of systems are tricky. Those kind of systems you have to try to anticipate in advance, because the computer models have a lot of problems in depicting what they're going to do.
All right. So since everybody could see them anyway, I have the pivotal weather snowfall forecast map. This is why everybody's getting, you know,
Antsy.
bent out of shape. So let's just see what they did here. So there you go. So these are some of the numbers, and it's got. You know what? I'm going to be generous tonight. Since I paid for the commercial license, I can show this. So pivotal weather. I'll go to the really close-up local map, so you can take a look at these numbers. And folks, when you see these maps, all they're basically doing is taking the precip that the model is producing and giving it a 10-to-1 ratio, and it comes out with snow amounts. So you've got Yonkers, Joe, 6.6, New York City, 3.8, Brentwood, 2.7, Bridgeport, 11.3, Allentown, 7.1, Scranton, 4.3, Poughkeepsie, 5, Middletown, 5. So you're somewhere between 6 and 11.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
And of course, you see where it cuts off in central New Jersey, so Alan Casper doesn't see a flake or an ice pellet, which is typical. But actually, Long Branch gets 1.2, Toms River a half an inch, 1.1 even in Philadelphia, believe it or not. Now, again, the way something like this happens is if you have a vigorous upper low that comes down and pulls off a surprise.
Yes.
And not saying it's going to happen, not saying that it isn't going to happen, because sometimes in the early part of the season, you get these first systems can be real tricky to forecast. So, by the way, the other thing is, interestingly enough, additional amounts are being produced later on next week with that Dakota system, and I do want to talk about this, and I want to get your opinion on this. So let's get this thing out of the way. I'm going to go back to the upper air because we're going to take a look at this system that's out in the west. And you see the deep trough that is in the western part of the United States. You actually have troughs along both coasts by early next week. So the models are insisting that ocean storm is going to move. So let's hope it does, so we can just at least get things moving again in the atmosphere. And here comes that. Really, this system coming into the west is quite a powerhouse here, coming into California, this wrapped up cutoff, and you still have the block. Now, what occurred to me, Joe, is the fact that the model the last couple of days was trying to take this low straight up into Canada. I mean, way to the left, straight up into Canada. And I'm thinking, how's it going to go up into the western part of Hudson Bay with a big blocking high that's sitting up there? And sure enough, now it's kind of recognizing that that's the case. And I'm just wondering, is it possible that we could see, and the European actually hints at this, I'm going to bring the surface back up. I'll go to the 18Z run because I want to illustrate my point. So let's go back. So here's the low going out. And you got a pretty big ocean storm, by the way, that develops out of that near Nova Scotia by the time we get to Monday and Tuesday. I can't even see how deep it is, but there's a million isobars there. That thing's not moving. I mean, it's just kind of sitting there. This low, Joe's going to occlude out, and then you still have the block. I mean, is it possible that all of a sudden there's a low there in Illinois? Is it possible that we could get something that occludes out, and then you get a low that moves east across the northern Ohio Valley and pushes into that blocking high?
And as a result,
Well,
I mean, it's just a game of push and shove. But does it have enough oomph to try to nudge out that blocking high? I mean, it seems that the models are trying to spread precipitation, make it a dirty ridge, if you will, in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast.
Yeah, the European. I'll bring the European map here, the whole U.S. one, and take a look at the surface. Just a second. Let's get because the European kind of hints at that too. I'm just wondering whether that might be the case, that we could get something that's going to try to go to the north, and you look at it and you say it's a simple cold front, but then you got that block up there.
And then you say that because of the block, instead of going to the north, the thing ends up spinning off to the east and south of us.
Well, I don't know about south of us, but certainly not taking a low up to Sault Ste. Marie with a cold front.
Right.
So just look at it. I got the European surface up on the screen here. And all right, so by the way, the European, you see the first low, and the European's been correct on this all along. It figured out right away that this was going to get mired out because of what was going on to the east. Here comes the second one. And, gives a little bit of precip, but not much. And then that goes out. Now here's the Dakotas low with the big blizzard. See that low goes. See Joe, that low goes up into completely occludes out, goes into Minnesota. All of a sudden, there's a low. There's a low here on the European that forms on the long occluded front down in Chesapeake Bay, and this is for late next week. And it's got ice it's got ice in Pennsylvania. It's got ice in upstate New York. It's got ice down maybe to Route 84. And the low, eventually, I don't think it's going to be and all of a sudden then the low is, sitting up near Atlantic City. I just wonder with that blocking high up there that the model is just, this thing is going to try to lift up. It's going to occlude out, and then it's going to be forced to redevelop a new low on the point of occlusion somewhere to the southeast of where the primary is, and
right.
then it's going to try to go eastward underneath the block.
Right. And the block, and of course that cold high over Quebec, supplying the cold air, probably a northeast or northeasterly wind, and you have that system that's developing, along the front, maybe on the point of occlusion, a triple point type storm, and boom, there you have your surprise.
Well, I mean, this
4 to 8 or 6 to 10-inch snowfall.
Well, this could be more. I can see why the Europeans got all this ice. I think you make a good point. Your point is well taken with regards to the fact that it's a bit of a dirty high at this point.
Right.
Because of the ridging that's in between the storm that's south of Nova Scotia and the deep trough that's going to be in the west. But that doesn't mean there can't be some low-level cold air. I mean, the very bottom of the atmosphere stays close to freezing in a lot of inland spots. But, I mean, this is a long ways off. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing a theoretical out there. But I'm a little intrigued by the overall pattern. And, by the way, there's your severe weather on the GFS if you want to just see how that comes out. But you see the thunderstorms, developing strong thunderstorms on Tuesday. Well, it starts to Tuesday night in the risk area, and then again on Wednesday night a little bit further to the east. It's fairly robust on the models even at this point. So SPC got their, they got it in their forecast. They're pretty serious about it if they've already got it in the day 6, day 7 time frame. And this storm in the Dakotas, like I said, I think there's probably going to be one of these storms that you're going to see blizzard warnings go up for a bunch of counties when it's all said and done.
And don't forget also that when we're looking at that line there, that's for presumably December 13th, December 14th. And don't forget that it was 1 year ago, a few days earlier, actually, on December the 11th, that we had that incredibly devastating area of severe weather that the epicenter was sort of in Kentucky. But I'm sure that a lot of the forecasters at SPC looking at the calendar and remembering back a year ago and saying, here we go again. Maybe not necessarily in Kentucky, but once again, right around this particular time in December. And maybe in thinking about what happened last year, he said, you know, what the heck? Let's put an area of concern up for day 6 and day 7. Again, thinking back to what happened last year and realizing that, yes, you can have devastating conditions this late in the season. And this certainly is very, very late in the season.
By the way, the teleconnections are showing some interesting developments today. Our PNA, the Pacific North America Index, which right now is rather strongly negative with the deep troughing in the west. Guess what? From now until December 15th and beyond, we're going to be, if the forecast is right from the ensembles last night, it comes all the way up to the neutral line. And some of the members, actually half the members, go positive on this after December 15th. So this is a change in the pattern in the west. It would say that the trough in the west goes away and that ridging will be going into the western part of the United States, and a corresponding troughing will be shifting into the east. And as far as the NAO is concerned, that is also still going to remain negative for a while, and then it climbs up but stays generally below the neutral line. It gets close to the neutral line. It's when you're seeing these teleconnections changing, especially when you go from a negative on the NAO, when it goes from negative and shoots up toward the neutral line, there's usually a storm developing somewhere. And the change in the PNA is something that we should pay attention to. And also, looking at the upper air, Joe, with these changes going on in the west, looks like the East Pacific oscillation is going to go negative too, which is important for those of you who want colder air to come down. There's actually even a little bit of cross-polar flow here on this run, last couple of runs of the GFS. Once we get past, say, the 17th or 18th of December, there's a pretty good cold flow that sets up from northwestern Canada into the plains, and then some of that will get deflected into the eastern part of the United States with time. So
I agree.
Yeah.
18th to the 18th to the 23rd on my calendar here. I had the notation that we could see a spell of unseasonably cold conditions. I think we're going to have one more, however brief, shot of mild weather right at the midpoint of the month, right on the around the 15th of December. The temperatures may, as we've seen, the last few days, last couple of days. I mean, my high temperature was like 56, 57 degrees at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Crazy. I mean, an unseasonably mild night last night. And of course, that helped to generate all the low clouds and areas of patchy fog that we saw through the day today. But I think we're going to have one more spell of unseasonably mild weather for a brief time around the 15th of December. And then, in agreement with you, sometime around the 18th to the 23rd, we'll be looking at a spell of a longer spell or more protracted spell of unseasonably cold weather. And say, if that does take place, and if we do have some kind of a system coming through, that just might be enough to provide us with the impetus for maybe some frozen precipitation just in time or just before the Christmas holiday. So we shall see on that.
We got a super chat here, Joe, from Jay's Boston Emergency Response. Thank you.
And he also points out Miller B. He's talking about the system that we're looking at for Sunday that's going to go across the Great Lakes and pass just off to our south. And he refers to that. He says, Miller B storm, you mean, Joe Rayo? Well, Jay, to tell you the gosh honest truth, I've never been into the categories of Miller A, Miller B, C, D, E. You know who's really big into that, Joe, is Larry Cosgrove.
Yeah.
He really loves, pointing out systems and calling them Miller A and a Miller B and that kind of stuff. But I never really got into that. I mean, if I see a storm crossing through the Great Lakes and passing to our south, I'll call it an Alberta Clipper. Yeah, I know it's a Miller B storm, Jay, but again, I was never into the various categories of Miller A, Miller B, Miller C. Miller.
I was gonna. My mind, and I understand. I'm the same. I'm the same way. I'm like that too. I never really got into the getting worried about the classifications of whether it was a Miller A or a Miller B.
I have yet to see on television. I've yet to see any weathercaster point to storms, especially in the wintertime, and say this is a Miller A, this is a Miller B, and the first one who does that, whoever that person is,
it's going to get the Miller B, the Miller beer joke.
Yeah, exactly. I tell you, it's true. It's true. If for example, Larry Cosgrove was still on television, he used to do Channel 9 here in New York for a number of years. Now, if he were to stand before the camera and say, this is going to be a Miller A or this is going to be a Miller B, I swear to you, and this is the way the mentality of the management at most news rooms in most television stations work. He would be called in either by the executive producer or by the news director and saying, Larry, I know it's meteorologically correct to refer to them as Miller A and Miller B, but don't do that. Please don't do that, because people are going to be thinking about Miller beer and that sort of thing. And Larry, I know, will put up a fight about that. Well, this is the proper way. Originally it was made by 1948 by Professor Miller, and he categorized all the. Larry, yeah, I know, but it's not. We just don't want this to be done. Can't you be like the other? And then that's the way TV stations, the mentality of TV people work. If, they may be the meteorologist may, and I'm sure it's happened to you, Joe, where you've said something on I
have never been and I used to, Joe, because you told me you used to watch on picks at 11. I could get technical on the air. No one ever told me not to say that.
Yeah,
I mean, I never said Miller A or Miller B.
I'm sitting, but yeah, you're right.
I was never, I would get technical sometimes to an extent, but never really. I get a lot more technical on this show, but I'm saying, I'm sitting there with Renata. It's a Saturday night. I'm sitting there on the couch watching Pix 11. There you are on the screen, and you're spending what got me not annoyed but jealous was the fact that at News 12 Westchester they always confined me to like a minute and a half. Joe, do it in a minute and a half. We had a consultant named Joe Ravito, who was a former news director at KDKA in Pittsburgh, and he would sit down and he would lecture me. He said, Joe, I know you get really excited when there's a major storm coming and you really want to tell everybody, but do it in a minute and a half. No more, no less. Don't do it. Don't go over 90 seconds. And I would say, but Joe, on Channel 4, they go 3 minutes. And then I'm sitting there, I'm watching you on weekends on Pix 11 on my couch, and I'm looking, and I have my wristwatch, and I'm saying, Renata, this is 4 minutes in, and he still hasn't gotten to the forecast yet, but he's telling everybody about what a 50-50 low is and what the Greenland block. I said, why can't I do that? He's doing that, but I can't do that. Well, I was
You're
lucky.
Absolutely right.
I had a great producer, Noreen Lark. She had to produce an hour newscast on the weekends, even in New York City. It was very hard for her to fill an hour newscast. She always had this time, and I was her buffer. And she would come to me, she says, "Can you do 5 minutes? I need you. I've got nothing. Can you do 5 minutes?" And sometimes she would even give me extra time at the end of the show as well. And I'd say, "Sure." I said, "Noreen, Just let me go. As long as you need me to go, I will eat all the time you need me to eat."
Yes.
And
exactly.
You know what? It worked like a charm. I used to say, I used to give her the time. I filled her show, and that was it made her happy, and I got to do things on the air that I probably couldn't have done anywhere else. In fact, I saw a video of mine from the half blizzard the night before I think it was the day before the half blizzard, and it was one of those long weather casts, and I had the European up, and I was doing all this, and I was listening to what I was saying. I hadn't seen that like, ever, but I was looking at it, and I was like, boy, I got away with murder with the stuff I did on the air. By the way, Julia B has hit super chat tonight. Thank you, Julia. Joe and Joe always enjoy the show and learning something new. Just hoping for a little snow in upstate New York. I'm sure between now and Christmas you will get your snow. Leon Probitsky hitting super chat tonight. Thanks for banging the tip jar, Leon. And just want to make sure we got everybody. And David Fuller, of course, commenting on the GFS run, said it would be nice to see some flakes in his area, which is in Monmouth County on Monday. Well, let's see what we're looking at tomorrow with regards to this. If the models are overdeveloped or underdeveloped, I would tend, if I had to lean one way, I would say underdeveloped, which almost guarantees that they're not developed enough. But we'll see.
Yeah, when you said about going, 4 or 5 minutes sometimes, one of our mutual friends from News 12 Long Island, Carol Silva, after I used to string at News 12 Long Island. In other words, I used to fill in whenever Joe needed a day off or one of the other forecasters. And one time I remember there was a fill-in producer, and she comes running into the studio. It was Carol and Lee Tyrell. And she turns to me and she says, we need some extra time because a SOT dropped out or something like that. She looks at me and says, can you do 3 minutes? And Carol looked at her and said, can he do 3 minutes? It was, and Carol had my nickname from Carol was Mr. Science. And somebody at News 12 Westchester referred to me as the accordion. And Joe, the weathercasters, their main thing is not necessarily to tell you what the weather is like in the newsroom or in the studio. The weathercaster's role is kill off time or use time to your best advantage. If they ask you to do 15 or 20 seconds, you do 15 or 20 seconds. They ask you to do 3 or 4 minutes, you do 3 or 4 minutes. And that's basically what the role of the weathercaster was, because we were not confined to the. Have you ever noticed, folks? Have you ever noticed in watching your local news at night, you've got the two anchors, you've got the sports guy and the weather guy. Who's the only one of that bunch that has to physically get up out of the chair and walk across the studio? Who's the only one that physically has to stand in front of what is, in essence, a PowerPoint presentation for you for 2 or 3 minutes and then walk back to the desk? I mean, it's us. It's the weather. And the only ones who don't work with a teleprompter, all that you see on your newscasts at night, from the two news anchors to a reporter doing a special investigative report, or the sports guy, they're all working off of a teleprompter. We in the weather profession, we don't use teleprompters. Whatever comes out of our mouth comes from up here. We have our own weather app up here, and we're reading off of that app and setting it out to all of you. So that's what I think made weathercasters or on-camera meteorologists so much different than. And Joe, we were the only ones every night who had to foretell the future. I mean, sometimes the sports guy would have to try to make a prediction on what the score would be in the Super Bowl or what the Giants might do, the over or under or whatever. But that's only once in a while. Every night when we stand in front of that camera, we had to literally predict the future, not just for tonight and tomorrow, but sometimes as far out as 5, 6, 7 days. And that was our job.
Yep, it was.
And that is our job, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking too, in the last couple of years, I was like, as far as time was concerned, they would ask me if they could take 10 seconds from me or 20 seconds, and I just basically said, you know what? My paycheck is, the decimal point in my paycheck is in exactly the same spot, whether I do 3 minutes or 30 seconds. By all means, you could have all the time back that you would like. I was the easiest person in the world to work with. Howard Hassel hitting super chat saying he's winter ready, and so are we. Go on, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, I was just I was just going to say there was one night when I almost went bazonkers, literally bazonkers. But everybody on election night at News 12 Westchester, Janine Rose, our news director, very heavy into politics, and she would dismiss any number of people on that particular night. The sports guy, go ahead, you can go home early. But me, she said, Joe, we need you. You have to stay. Why did Joe have to stay? Because if something happened on the air, if a political analyst didn't show up, or if something dropped out or whatever, Joe, go to the green wall. You got to kill off the 2 or 3 minutes or whatever. And basically, I stayed on some election nights, Joe, until like 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember the one with the hanging chads. That was what, the 2000 election?
Yeah.
They had me stay till like 2 a.m. because I had to be there in case something happened. And one night, I knew that was my job. But I also knew that after the election coverage was over, we did an hour-long show. And I'm there to do my regular weather. And here I am. It's at 1:30 or 1:45 of the morning. And all of a sudden, I hear in my ear, Joe, we don't need you, or we're not going to need you for this hour of. And I've already stayed there like 6 hours. I've already been there like 3 hours past my time. And I went into that control room and I screamed bloody murder. I said, you kept me here. You said I was going to be on for the hour show. Now you're telling me I don't have to be on for the hour show. And one of the producers, Andrea White, sweetest, nicest girl that I worked with in all the years at News 12. In fact, her husband Doug was one of our directors, and she came up to me and she was holding me back. That's how angry I was that I was kept there long past my normal time. I could have been excused or sent home early like all the others. And she's like, point blank, and she's whispering in my ear, said, I'll find you 30 seconds. I'll find you. If I get 30 seconds for you, will you be happy? And I said, if you just give me 5 seconds, as long as there's a reason for me to stay here past 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I still remember that was like 20 years ago. But man, that's another facet of television weather that you folks don't see. The behind the scenes stuff. I think the behind the scenes stuff. Do you agree with me, Joe? The behind the scenes stuff sometimes was far more interesting than what you saw actually happening in front of the camera.
Oh my God, we were watching the Sopranos.
Yeah.
Wow. Because the Sopranos would always run over. The newscast started at 10 o'clock, so the Sopranos would run, the start at 9 on HBO, but oftentimes it would end at 10:10, 10:15, or even later than that. So I was off to the side on the news set. The news was going on. I'd have the Sopranos. We'd watching the Sopranos. We'd go to the commercial break. The anchors would ask me what happened on the Sopranos. And so I'd have to fill them in. I don't know who. By the way, I don't know who hid Billy the Kid's comment. This one was okay. I punished Billy the Kid. I gave him a timeout and threatened to throw him off the channel if he didn't stop this. I'm worried about this, that, and the other thing crap that he does. But he says the days of Walter Cronkite are long gone. Now newscasters, they don't dress or act professionally. And I've said this to you, by the way. You should thank God that you're not doing anything in TV news, because you know what? They'd be forcing you to do TikTok videos. And if there's one thing that I have no patience for, I don't have the app. I won't even go on TikTok because all that stuff is, we all know all that data is being collected and sent over to China, to the Chinese Communist Party. And this is not a conspiracy theory, folks. This is pretty well known. I just couldn't do some of the things that people do on TikTok videos, and thankfully we're not being forced to do that.
Steve Lapointe, it says it's his resentments that we're hearing about, staying till 2 o'clock or past 2 a.m. Steve, I don't know what you do for a living, but I hope that your boss one day calls you in and says, Steve, I want you to stay 4 or 5 hours past your normal time. And no, it did not. It was just assumed on election night that we all got paid our regular fee, our regular salary. We were compensated by more food than we could ever cram into our mouth. I mean, a tremendous amount of food was always taken in on election night at News 12 Westchester. And a lot of that was left over into the wee hours of the morning. So at least that, plus the fact that you could sit in your office and do other things. I used to, write articles for online vendors or whatever. So I did put my overtime, the time that I was forced to stay there till the wee hours of the morning, to some use. But it's just the idea that here I am, I'm being kept there until 1:30 or 2 a.m. because I'm going to be part of the final 1 hour roundup show. And that one year, they had so much election stuff going on that they just determined they were just heavy. And who are we going to knock out? We'll knock Rayo out. And I'm standing there saying, and what the heck was I kept here for 4 hours? That's what got me very upset. So anyway.
So there. Oh, good God. Anyway, let's wrap the show up because you know what? I'm exhausted.
All right.
All right.
And tomorrow night we'll be just as confused tomorrow night with the models as we were tonight.
Correct. So everybody have a nice night. Thanks for being here. Thanks for those of you who hit the super chat tip jar. If you're watching the show on a replay and you feel you want to hit the tip jar, you can hit the super thanks, which is you can do on anyway. You can do it. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Nighty night.